The very fact that we're here on this WebEx platform is a sign of just how much the world has changed in the last 6 months since we last met. And it's been an understatement to say it's been challenging. We've been hit hard in New York City with a pandemic that has changed the way all of us are living and has put ACC on the very front lines as essential workers serving the city, serving the animals of New York at great risk. And we've also taken a giant step as a country and as a city and a community in really stepping forward and addressing the systemic racism that is in our society. And ACC is dedicated to the message, and we believe in that Black Lives Matter, and that we are serving all the communities of New York as an organization. So it is not a normal time, and yet at the same time, some things haven't changed at all. We're still very much the front lines for animal welfare in New York City. We're still working hard every day to end animal homelessness in New York City. We're working hard with our partners, with the New Hope partnerships, with our volunteers. We're working hard to foster donors, working on, again, the mission of ending homelessness for animals in New York. But at the same time, there's nothing normal about these circumstances. And you'll hear a lot from Risa today in her report about the challenges and how we're meeting them around COVID and around the struggle for social justice and equality. So it's going to be an intense meeting. We're going to hear a lot and talk a lot. And I just wanted to start, and I think Risa will join me, just to say how much we are committed as a board, as an organization, to the health and safety of our workers, of the employees at ACC. We couldn't do anything without them, and this has been a very challenging time. And we also, as a board and as an organization, are fully dedicated to fostering an environment that is one of inclusion and engagement and opportunity, where people are able to speak up and challenge anything that they see as a problem. And as a board, I know that we have a lot of work to do around being a more inclusive and more diverse board, and we are going to take on that challenge. We've already started. We've had an executive committee meeting dedicated fully to that topic, and we are absolutely going to be engaged and committed ourselves to making fast, measurable change that is going to make a difference and make the organization better. And Risa.
I would add to that that ACC absolutely shares that commitment, and we as the board and ACC have started to talk about that, and we know it's our responsibility. We serve the 5 boroughs of New York City. We want to be a very proactive and responsible and responsive player in systemic racism that exists not only outside what's going on, but we really need to do some deep reflection on the inside. And as an organization, we've already started that. We are clearly aware that words do not mean action. And so all of our words, we really are putting thought behind it. And the first part of the process is to think and to learn and to listen. And we are providing all of our staff an opportunity to do that through certain books and resources that we're making available. And the leadership team has been engaging in all kinds of webinars. There's so much out there. We would be really remiss if we weren't paying attention and weren't working to improve and just examine our own organization from the inside and make it better that way. And one of the biggest resources that we're going to engage in is to hire a subject matter expert to help us do some assessment and to help us talk about these issues because they are very important. And so we as an organization are committed, just like the board is, to really play a role that we need to play, especially because we represent such a diverse community. New York City has so much, and it's very important. And the Black Lives Matter movement certainly opened our eyes to implicit biases that really need to be addressed, and we're committed to doing that. And so it takes patience, though. A lot of, and internally we have conversations about this too. What are you doing? What are you doing? Right now, we're learning and learning a lot. There's a lot to be learned. And so we are not jumping into the fray saying, okay, here's the action plan. It is going to take time. And so what we've asked of our staff, and we ask of the public too, is to be patient, to give us the time to do this the right way, and to learn and listen and engage.
Thanks. So important. And again, the board is really eager to be partnering with you and the team on this effort. Just a few housekeeping items before we jump into board business. Just reminding everybody that this is one of the two public meetings the board has every year. This is a board meeting, and the public is here and invited and accessing our meeting. It's also being recorded and will be posted after the meeting. We always look forward to hearing from members of the public, and we've been really working hard to organize this online meeting to be as close to what is the norm. And we also hope this is the only time we ever have to do this. So members of the public who are here in attendance, if you would like to take part in the public comments section at the end of our meeting, we invite you to speak for no more than 2 minutes. And all the ground rules that are in place when we're meeting in public remain in place. We will stop the session if anyone is attacking people or using language that is inappropriate or making any kind of personal attacks. But we are here to listen, and we're eager to hear you. To make that easier and to sign up, if you could use the chat function in WebEx, and please let us know your name and your contact information in case we need to reach out to you afterwards with further information regarding your comments or questions. So please give us your name and your contact information. And those of you who have phoned in and aren't using the web-based technology, there isn't a way, I believe, for you to write in the chats, but I'd invite you to use our info, I-N-F-O, at nycacc.org email, our general info address, and just make it clear in the subject matter that it's for board review and that you wanted to share your comments or questions with us. And I would say also, if for some reason we aren't able to get everybody their 2 minutes, if you find yourself, we have basically until 11 a.m. and we budgeted the normal amount of time for comments, but we don't know what the online experience is going to be. So if we do run out of time, again, please use that info@nycacc.org address, and just in the subject matter, make it clear that it's for the board to review. And again, we thank you for your interest. We thank you for being here, but I'm also reminding you that it's a board meeting and we have a lot of board business. The first one being to approve the minutes from our January 24th meeting. So I'm looking for a motion to approve those minutes.
Approve.
And a second.
Second.
This is a tricky one. We're all going to have to unmute and I'll agree to approve.
Okay.
I approve.
Approve.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. And we are now going to, sorry, I'm juggling screens here, but we're going to hear from our finance team. Gina Manente from Rosenberg and Manente will present and approve our audited financials. The audit committee of the board has already met earlier to review the preliminary audit, and we had a few questions, and we're going to hear the full report today, and it's also in the documents that were shared to the board prior to the meeting. So Gina, over to you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. For everyone who doesn't know me, my name is Gina Menente. I'm the audit partner at Rosenberg Menente, and I will be presenting a summary of the financial statement audit for Animal Care Centers of New York City for the year ending June 30th, 2019. And I don't know if there's a slide up. I can't see it from my end. But
Victoria, this is the first slide.
give it a few minutes. And if you can turn to the first page, the following page. Great. So the independent auditor's results, the auditor's report is an unqualified opinion. And it is, in our opinion, the financial statement present fairly. And if you click again, Victoria, you'll see the note come up. The financial position of Animal Care Centers of New York in all material respects for the year ending June 30th, 2019. If you turn to the next slide, thank you, and click one more time. Thank you. Changes in net assets and liabilities, I'd like to discuss them briefly. Total assets in the financial position for fiscal year 2019 resulted in assets totaling approximately $80 million. In fiscal year 2018, it was $4.5 million approximately, giving that variance of almost $76 million. And that increase was primarily due to assets associated with the purchase and development of 1906 Flushing, approximately $76 million. If we look at the liabilities, we'll see a significant increase as well. Almost $78 million in fiscal year 2019 versus $2.5 million approximately 2018, giving that $75 million overall increase in liabilities. And that increase is primarily due to the mortgage payable of approximately $75 million and interest payable as well of approximately $90,000, both of which are associated with the purchase and the development of 1906 Flushing Avenue. And if we could please turn to the next slide. And one more time. And now we're going to discuss the changes without donor restrictions. And these are contributions that are unrestricted, no temporary regarding timing or as well as a purpose restriction. Without donor restriction, net assets increased over 2018 by approximately $822,000. So looking at the without restrictions, revenue support and gains, in 2019, we saw an overall approximately $24 million versus 2018 of approximately $21 million, giving you that increase of approximately $2.4 million. And that increase was primarily due to revenue coming directly from the city of New York. That was approximately $3 million, and that was due to a one-time enhancement, which is offset partially by lower overall contributions. Looking at the expenses, you'll see expenses increased as well. We ended the year with total expenses for the organization of approximately $23 million versus in fiscal year 2018, approximately $21 million, giving you that increase of $1.9 million. Few reasons why this expense increased. Most significant of which is the increase in the total number of employees at ACC, as well as overall salary increases of approximately $1,047,000. Vehicles overall increased the expenses of approximately $211,000. Facility expenses increased over the prior year approximately $177,000, as well as supply, service, and medical increased over the prior year approximately $271,000, and technology and equipment increased approximately $180,000 over the prior year. If we turn to the next slide, if we now look at changes with donor restrictions, so these were increased. This would be what came in this year for contributions that were restricted either to a purpose or due to timing. So in 2019, restricted contributions totaled approximately $1.3 million. Satisfaction of both time restrictions and program restrictions, this would be the release of those restrictions, was approximately $1,386,000, giving the overall decrease in restricted net assets of approximately $64,000. We started the year off the organization on July 1st, 2018, with approximately $1,051,000 in restricted assets, and we ended the year June 30th with approximately $987,000. If we turn to the next slide, and this is just, thank you, overall changes in support, which is your revenue gains and support and your expenses, just looking at 1 year ratio to the other. And you'll see overall support in the revenue contributions and gains increased approximately 10%, 2019 versus 2018, and overall expenses did increase as well, approximately 9%. And the last slide I'd like to just discuss, this is a major category. It's a graph depicting a major category of expense breakdown. So it's looking at the total expenses incurred throughout the organization and how it breaks up between program, general administration, and fundraising. How much of the dollar goes towards each of these elements as a ratio. So, and you can see year to year, this is 2018 versus 2019, very steady from 18 into 19. And looking at that, you'll look at, if you look at program specifically as a percentage of total expenses, in 2019 it was approximately 87.67 versus in 2018, 87.54%. General administration in 2019 was approximately 10.21% of total expenses versus 2018 of 10.24. And then looking at the fundraising, in 2019, approximately total expenses equated for fundraising was 2.12% versus 2018 of 2.22%. Very steady as far as the spending levels as a percentage of total cost. And I just want to thank everybody.
So as a board now, we need to approve the audit. If I may have a motion to approve the audit.
Motion.
And a second.
Second.
And all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
The audit is approved. And we'll now move to our update on our FY20 forecast and also review and approve the FY21 budget, which we've all had in advance to review as well. Joe Bellin from BTQ, over to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having us get together. And what I'd like to do is to present the projection for fiscal 20, which the fiscal year is ending next week, and then also go over with you the fiscal 21 budget. So if we can go to the next slide, please. For fiscal 20, ACC is projecting to end the fiscal year with a surplus, of $137,000. In the year fiscal 20, ACC received a $3 million one-time enhancement from DOH to provide additional staffing and other operating expenses to primarily support medical operations, the care centers, adoption, behavior foster, and the community pets program. This is the second year that ACC has received that additional funding. In addition, ACC also received $179,000 for cost of living adjustment. Next slide, please. Here you'll see a comparison of the revenues and the expenses on a summary level, budget to forecast. The revenues are coming in about $751,000 lower than budget. Most of that shortfall is due to an ambitious goal that was set for contributions. The goal was to increase contributions from the prior year by $1.3 million. ACC wasn't able to meet that goal. It fell short by about $625,000. But ACC was able to increase contributions by almost $700,000 over the prior year. So that is actually an impressive increase from year to year. Other shortfalls were in event revenue, and that actually was because of COVID-19. The spring fling, which normally generates $70,000 or $80,000 in a year, was postponed because it was an event that was to occur in the spring. And then also there was a little shortfall in shelter services, which were about $190,000 lower than budget. Although there were the shortfalls, ACC was able to offset the reductions with savings and efficiencies in operations. And you can see that expenses came in $888,000 lower than budget. And that's what helped generate the surplus. Next slide, please. If anyone has any questions, just feel free to ask at any time. We don't have to wait until the end of the presentation. This page is a graphic representation of the revenues projected for the year versus the budget. The blue line is the budget, the green is the forecast, and you'll see that for many of the revenue items, we're close to budget, or actually in a few places exceeding budget. One thing I do want to point out is that in terms of total funding, the funding from DOH represents 84% of all funding for the organization in fiscal 20. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, expenses are projected to be $888K lower than budget. Personnel expenses were a little higher than budget, about $128,000. And that is primarily due to an increase in overtime. And that increase is partially offset by lower salaries and wages, and also savings in fringe benefit expense, primarily lower healthcare expenses. Other than personal expense, or OTPS as it's called, were approximately $1 million lower than budget. Medical supplies and services almost $600,000 under budget, and that is due to price negotiations, efficiency, and reduced need for certain medical supplies. Supplies themselves were almost $300,000 under budget, and that is due to lower kennel cleaning, janitorial, animal, and office supplies expense. Insurance expense was lower, and that was due to lower premiums for most of the insurance policies that ACC carries. And there were also savings in technology expense, especially in software expense and tech and server support. Next slide. Again, this is just a graph comparing the fiscal 20 budget to the fiscal 19 forecast. And you'll see that most of the expense categories are lower than budget. Salaries were a little bit above budget. Next slide. Looking at the fiscal 21 budget, ACC's proposed budget for fiscal 21 is a break-even budget with revenues of $21.85 million. We're assuming that the DOH contract is projected to be the same as in fiscal 20, almost $15 million. We're also in this particular budget showing a continuation of the $3 million one-time enhancement funding. Contributions and event income for fiscal 21 is projected to be $3.3 million, of which roughly $1.8 million represents restricted grants and the release of grant funds. $1 million is unrestricted funding, and roughly $500,000 is event income. ACC has a goal in fiscal 20 to raise $4 million. $3.5 million of that is coming from institutional individual giving, and $0.5 million from events. The fiscal 21 goal is a 12.5% increase to the fiscal 20 projected results. And you'll see that when we talk about raising $4 million, that we're projecting $3.3 million of income. And what we're saying is that throughout the year, $4 million will be raised, but not all of those monies will necessarily be utilized in fiscal 21. Some of the money will be restricted grants that may carry over into the next fiscal year. Personnel on the expense side, personnel service expense is projected to increase by about $600,000. And that is to reflect the current staffing structure and also overtime based on current spending in fiscal 20. OTPS expenses are relatively flat. We're only going to see about a $29,000 increase compared to fiscal 20. Professional fees are increasing, and that is due to additional uniform security services at the care centers, and then also a contract with the new financial firm. Increase in medical supplies and services reflects an increase primarily due to inflation. Medical costs are always going up, and they're usually higher than inflation, and just an anticipated higher volume of intake. And then offsetting some of those increases are just reductions in outside vet expenses and technology expense. The next two slides are just detailed information of the revenue and the expenses. So on slide 8, we see the breakout of revenues, the DOH contract, city council funding, shelter placement. You'll see the biggest increases in the contributions, revenue line, events, and then other revenue. And so the $500,000 increase is primarily driven by the increase in contributions. If we go to slide 9, sorry that it's hard to read, but here you'll see that the personnel services is increasing primarily because we're just reflecting the current staffing level that's going on. We're showing a decrease in overtime because we're anticipating that the current staffing level will be able to manage things and not incur as much overtime as it did in fiscal 20. And then for the OTPS expenses, as we discussed, the increases in professional fees and some increases in medical supplies, but then a decrease in outside vet services and some minor increases and decreases for other expense line items. Are there any questions on the fiscal 21 budget or the fiscal 20 forecast? Thank you.
No questions. Any questions from the board?
No, thank you for that.
Okay, so we are, we faced a lot of challenges in 2020, fiscal year 2020, and we're heading into 21 with a lot of challenges and targets, particularly in development and fundraising. And we know this is a particularly difficult time for many people in terms of being able to give, and we're very aware and sensitive to that, but we also need to work very hard to make sure that our work and our asks are very focused and specific to this time and to our needs, and keeping our mission of making ever the progress towards eliminating homelessness of animals in New York City. So we need to approve the budget and vote on it for the fiscal year 21. May I have a motion to do so?
So moved.
A second?
Denise seconds.
And all in favor? Aye.
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 The budget is approved. And we're now moving to hear from our CEO and Executive Director, Risa Weinstock, to give us an update on all that's going on in the shelters and with ACC. Over to you, Risa.
Thanks, Patrick. Good morning, everyone. As Patrick said, this is the first virtual meeting we've done, and so it's a little difficult to turn to my colleagues, but we're going to try as best possible. The leadership team is on board, so if the board has certain questions, just you can jump right in because I will turn to them. It was a little difficult to orchestrate very formal presentations from everybody. So let's turn to the first slide. Okay, so in June, we always do the look back based on where we left off at the last board meeting in January. And so looking at the intake from January through May, you can see a substantial decline in 2020. We started off the year as everyone else did. It was business as usual. We were really working toward surrender prevention, our admissions program, building out community work. And we talked a lot in January about surrender and what that looks like and what's the population who's bringing in surrenders. As you can see in the data here, looking at 2019 and 2020, look at owner surrender and stray. Usually stray is, about 1,500, 1,600 more generally than owner surrender. And you can see in the last 5 months, it's almost equal. And of course, so much of what's happened and how our data is presented is a reflection of the pandemic. I also want to point out in 2020, the euthanasia requests that we receive. As you know, ACC is provides this as a service to owners. And even during the pandemic, we were serving people who had a need for end-of-life services. Okay, we can turn to the next slide, please. This is a snapshot of just May 2020. So the previous one took you back about 4 years. This is just what's happened in the last 5 months. And as I said before, January and February, business as usual. We were really working on surrender prevention and community work. In March, you see a decline. And of course, in around the stay-at-home order was March 23rd. And immediately you see the dip from February to March. Moving to April, people are staying at home. We were all really terrified. This is a human health crisis. We had really, I think, the reflection of the community that took it seriously and didn't leave their homes. Of course, we were still open. We were deemed an essential service. We are very mindful of the importance of our work that we do for the community. But I think what we needed to be very clear about was that we were emergency services, and anybody who could make an appointment, we would take appointments. We had to be really mindful of our own staff's health and how many people we could serve. But the intake is really a reflection, I believe, of the city's stay-at-home order. However, in May, you can see it starting to go back up. And that's a reflection of a few things. One is that the spike in the pandemic has leveled off, and now in June it's declining. More people are coming out. It's also kitten season. It's just something that we really have to study. We can make educated guesses about how this data is trending and why, but we really need to study this. This is just, as everyone always says, you know, a new world that we're living in. It's challenging times. There's a lot of unknown. Information changes from day to day, week to week. And so that's what we need to do strategically, is to continue to study the data of the animals coming in. The other thing in May, what you see is, you know, when we went into emergency services and the city went into lockdown, we were asking people to make appointments so that it was to protect their own health and safety, as well as our staff's health and safety. And then in May, we're starting to follow up on those appointments. So we have more appointments coming in. And so we are getting busier. Next slide, please. Okay. With respect,
Other than appointments, anything else significant change in the methodology or the way we went about taking in intakes?
well, we'll get to, if you could just wait a little bit, we're going to get to the admissions process and surrender prevention and the hotline. There's a lot more to go through. So let's just get the data first.
Perfect.
Good, excellent question. We'll get there.
Thanks. Perfect. Thank you.
If you look at the placement for the last 5 months, when we say we were closed for emergency services, we didn't shut down. We were an essential business. Placing animals was absolutely key. And you can see the way this is reflected, New Hope, direct adoptions, and on the top is the return to owners. First, a huge shout out to our New Hope partners, because they really continue to be an essential partner in placing animals. And even with the pandemic and with people staying at home, we had a significant turnout for adoptions. So if we move to the next slide, and I'll go into details again about New Hopes and direct adoptions. I just want to lay out the data. Okay, so how we prepared for COVID. immediately before we even went into lockdown, we saw this coming, and this is national. There's a lot, animal welfare there's so many great resources out there and organizations that we benchmark with, we work with. So there's a big push, like we have to place animals. Because really what we were most concerned about with the pandemic is that there would be this rush to surrender animals, that people were going to they need to get, those services in order immediately. And we didn't see the rush to surrender. And so at the same time, what we were able to do is just put a message out there through social media, press. There were so many inquiries from so many newspapers about pushing out animals for placement. Within the first week, we had 5,000 foster applications. And in 1 week, I mean, these are tremendous statistics and showing the community really responding to the crisis. We had 431 pets placed just the first week, which is really outstanding. And then that allowed us to reduce the in-shelter population significantly. And this is across Brooklyn, Manhattan, and Staten Island, from 335 on a daily average to 127 in the first week, which was really incredible because we had to think about staffing. We had to think about how we were going to keep our teams safe. And when the lockdown came into place, that was when we launched our team staffing, so that there were really reduced significantly the number of staff that are in the care centers. For anyone who has been to our care centers, space is a challenge. It's a challenge for the number of animals, and it's a greater challenge for the number of staff that we have working there on a daily basis. So by having the population reduced, we were able to separate our teams into Team A and Team B. And then we also were able to identify those individuals who could work from home would work from home until further notice. Recognizing that the people who are in the care centers are really the frontline workers. They are tremendous. They really have to take a lot of risk to serve New York City. And we have been very, very careful about the demands that we put on their time. And we have had a very robust HR engagement with all of our staff to make sure we provide the resources that they need. In addition, you should know, just like anywhere else, we did have staff who had family issues, who had compromised immunities, the gamut of reasons of how people could be at risk. We had that too. So our staffing, just off the top, there were certain people who really had to have either a work from home set up, or who had to take FMLA or paid family leave. And there's an assortment of state and city programs and ways that we could help our staff to manage. We did not furlough anybody.
That was my question, if we furlough, but you just answered.
We did not. And of course, the challenges from the beginning were the challenges that the world was facing. PPE shortage was very significant. We could not compete with the hospitals in the beginning for masks and gloves and even cleaning supplies. So we were really, really careful and had to take it slowly. Like it was a different world. And immediately for us, it was human health first. We had to think of our staff. We have staff who are in the risk age groups and have risk factors. They have family members. There was commuting issues. I mean, it was terrifying for everybody. And human health came first. And that's what informed all of our initial planning for COVID. And with staffing, again, we were very, very aware of the challenges that our own staff were going to face. We were fortunate. We have a great finance team and purchasing team, and we were really fortunate to receive not necessarily masks and gloves immediately, because that was really, we were deferring to the human side and the hospital shortages, but we did have a lot of Purell and cleaning supplies. We didn't run short there, which was really good. And again, in the very beginning, they weren't even saying you should wear masks. So the evolving health protocols from the human and animal side also started to inform what we need to do and the supplies we need to purchase. On the animal side, there was a lot of concern. Will animals get COVID? Will they transfer it to other people? And again, it was just evolving. We were learning as we were going along. I think the first sense that we got that about animals were the tigers in the Bronx Zoo, or maybe before that, I think there was a cat. When we get Dr. Brennan will talk about, there's a cat and a dog in China that may have been exposed and showed signs of COVID. But then in the United States, we had the tigers. And so, you know, that took a lot of thinking to figure out what do we need to do inside the shelter. This could be a problem until it turned out that they did have COVID, but they recovered and no human got it from them. And then also the challenges of what we anticipated was the pets from COVID positive homes. We thought we would be inundated with requests from people who have COVID and might have been in a panic. I don't want to give it to them. They may give it to my family who's not sick. And again, those challenges. Fortunately, as it turns out, it seems that the experts are saying that the pets can't give it to you, but you certainly could transfer COVID to your dogs and cats. And again, Dr. Brennan will address that later.
And you mentioned like earlier, now that the city is reopening, there might be a lot of deferred intakes that might start coming along with kitten season starting. So there'll certainly be a number of summer challenges as a result of city reopening, plus summer being normally busy anyway.
We are very, very aware of that and building that into our summer plans. And again, it's very difficult because we are balancing human health with the needs of animal welfare and the community of people who have pets. It is a real balancing and risk-taking act, and we'll get to a little bit of that in the coming slides. So next slide, please. So some of the changes that we made to protocols, if you see on the right-hand side, we were doing what any organization needs to do, and that's follow the experts. And that includes experts not only on the human health side, the CDC, the World Health Organization, but on the animal side too. There's the National Animal Care and Control Association, NACA. They are about animal control functions and field services. We followed UC Davis and Maddie's shelter medicine program. I mean, we really needed to be guided by the experts in the field. And again, we are balancing human health. In New York City and in our shelters, there are a lot of risks. The shelters are small, and we have people who commute by subway, who take public transportation to get to the care center. So there was a lot of exposure that we were trying to work against or minimize. The first group of protocol changes came in veterinary services. I'm going to just pass the baton to Dr. Brennan to talk about that. Clearly, the suspension of spay neuter is a very big issue because, like you said, David, it's kitten season. We are seeing an increase in intake. So I'll let Dr. Brennan address that and some of the other protocols that we have in place currently and that we initially set out.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Risa. Yeah, I think from the get-go, as Risa had indicated, we were immediately involved in national level calls with experts from the CDC, the American Veterinary Medical Association, the big vet schools that have shelter medicine programs, NACA, et cetera, of how to manage this, because this is a One Health issue. What we do in veterinary medicine and in shelter medicine impacts our human counterparts. And there were daily calls for weeks on how to strategize. And I'm very, very grateful for those, because as those calls were going on, we were experiencing it. Most of the people on those calls were not. So it was good to get rational, level-headed information from people that weren't in panic mode and in crisis mode as we were approaching that at ACC. So one of the first things that was discussed in this conglomerate of people, and there were literally over 100 participants on these calls every day from large cities and national organizations, but we had to do our part to keep our human healthcare system intact. And so that meant social distancing, reducing our consumption of PPE, and doing everything that we can not to become a victim so that we could support our healthcare colleagues. And it became clear that one of our biggest risks was spay and neuter. And nationally, very, very passionate professionals and experts across the country took a hard stand and said, no, this is an elective procedure. We don't need to do it right now. We have to be able to support our human healthcare colleagues, not become a victim, and not utilize a lot of PPE. We all knew in the end that there was going to be consequences, as this virus has caused consequences for everybody. So temporary suspension of spay neuter was an easy thing. Immediately we implemented that. Recognizing now that we have to build a plan to accommodate all of those waivers that have been pushed out into the community. And we are currently working on a plan now. We have done a slow pilot program where we are starting to bring in male cats. And from there, we will move on to the female cats and dogs and after that. And we're also trying to engage the veterinary community to assist us. So we are in planning stages for that currently. We also had to develop a way, and this was a pretty common thing that had to happen with veterinary hospitals as well, as trying to figure out a way how to provide health information without actually bringing in people into the care center. So again, this is all about minimizing traffic and large groups of people in the care centers so that our staff remain healthy and able to work. And telemedicine became very quickly the go-to there. And we implemented a platform called doxy.me, or we didn't invent it, we borrowed it, and we started to set up opportunities to engage with our fosters and our adopters in healthcare issues over the phone. Most of those things could be mitigated by FaceTime and video conferencing. And then when we had to bring those animals in for, if there were concerns that needed to be addressed, we did make provisions for that. We also did implement sort of telebehavior as well, and our behavior staff also triaged and mitigated issues via video platforming. The biggest thing that was a concern from mine since the day that the planes landed from Wuhan back in January was the fact that obviously it was quite clear at that point that there was a very huge opportunity for this virus to take hold in the country, which did take place. And then what happens to the animals of people that are infected with COVID, and where are these animals going to go? And one of the main issues at this time, and understand that this is an emerging novel disease, and so we don't know anything about it. So we have to go and base our actions on hunches and best guesses. And there was concern about the ability for animals to become infected, and then also an unknown as to whether or not animals could turn around and transmit the virus back to humans. And given the situation that we went through at ACC in 2016 and 2017 with the novel low-path avian influenza that came through our shelter and infected over 500 cats, that was pretty clear on my mind that we did not want that to happen again. So we had to figure out a way to try to either figure out what the best way was to house animals that were going to come from homes from COVID positive people. And this was a reality. People died from this disease and left their pets behind. And we had to come together as a city to figure out how to deal with that problem, because the last thing that you want to do is co-house large numbers of animals that potentially have COVID in a small building such as a shelter. That is the recipe for disease spread 101, and we saw it happen in 2017. So we had to become pretty creative and aggressive on how we were going to try to manage those cases.
Sorry, Dr. Brennan, just in 2017, that was the cat flu, correct?
Cat flu,
Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you.
You know, we had firsthand information how this could go. And so but we also understood that we were going to be the last resort for some of these individuals that had no options for their pets. We did see that happen approximately over 100 times. So we did have to set up quarantine, sort of quarantine. We got guidelines from the CDC on what to do with pets from COVID positive homes, and we followed those to a T. So those animals had to be segregated from other animals in the population for 14 days. And I think you can imagine that our shelter staff was pretty on edge about having to go and care for these animals in the shelter, despite pretty stringent PPE. I think I can stop there.
Okay. In the interest of time, I'm just going to mention admissions and placement, but Ellen will hop on in a couple of slides just to get into them in a little more detail. But the point I wanted to make is that while we were reduced in staff, we were open, and the website said emergencies only, but everything else was by appointment. And so, as you can see from the intake data, we were open, and the surrender prevention data, we were helping people, and the appointments were our way of managing a human health crisis. Same thing with trying to do as much contact-free as possible and working through issues with potential owner surrenders. And I'll let Ellen talk about that.
And Risa, sorry, just one point of clarification, because I fully understand that we were open fully and that it was for by appointment only. There was never a moment where we weren't able to schedule appointments during this time, correct?
We were scheduling.
No one was turned away who wanted to make an appointment. And we were open for emergency without appointments.
Correct.
Thank you.
And
team, I just want to thank everybody. I know it was a very scary time, and your leadership and commitment and dedication to supporting our animals in our community is quite extraordinary. So from all of the board, we're just reinforcing again our gratitude for everything that you've done, particularly in the last 4 months or 3 months with all this uncertainty.
Thank you. We really appreciate hearing that. It is, we've always thought, and when we talk about strategy later, we always thought, animals first. How do we serve the most number of animals with the best, the best possible outcomes? And now we've folded into all of that. How do we keep people safe, healthy, alive, including not just our staff, but the people who come into our care centers? There's a lot layered onto what we do now. With respect to field, again, we were following the NACA standards, really limiting responses to emergency only. Of course, we were out there picking up sick, injured, and abandoned animals, and there was definitely a lot of work on the part of our field staff getting out into the community, which we'll get to in a couple of slides. So
I believe the field even was going above and beyond in assisting seniors and others who normally would come for pantry visits or had other issues, and they were working with the animal task force to go out and assist people in their homes that they might not normally have done, but it was obviously a needed service.
Right, and we'll get into that in a little more detail. Next slide, please. And then just internally, the health and safety protocols that we put in pretty much from the start, and certainly as we got supplies. And there was a great, in the last couple of months, there's been a great outpouring of volunteers and other organizations, and the Department of Health and the city providing certain protective equipment like masks and gloves for free. So we were grateful for that. But what we're doing to protect health and safety of not only our staff, but our clients too, and following all the guidelines, city, state, CDC, face masks, social distancing, enhanced cleaning. We have Purell, we have lots of cleaning supplies, which is really helpful. Sanitizers everywhere, really keeping the number of people who come into those care centers to a minimum. And employee health. And employee health, as I said before, it means so much. It's resources for paid time off, family leave, taking care of a person in your family who is compromised. It's mental health resources. I mean, there's so much stress and there's a lot of resources out there. And I thank the city and Christine, your regular updates and texts have been incredible. We share that with the staff regularly. It's stressful. It's stressful even if you're not an essential. We are taking advantage of all of the resources that the city are providing and our insurance carrier provides, and just internally through webinars and compassion fatigue training. And also, we really feel like in this pandemic, knowledge is power. And we are on a regular basis communicating with all of our staff once a week. We have a town hall by Zoom. On average, 175 people attend it. There's the chat box, they ask questions, and you know, some questions we just don't have the answers for, like at the point where we didn't have enough face masks. And we were talking about how you make your own, and sending out every Friday, we have a newsletter that goes out to the whole staff with tips and resources. So, you know, this is just a whole other layer of really important work that we have to be paying attention to. Next slide. So jumping into placement, just so quickly, a snapshot of just for COVID, we placed 721 pets with adopters just for COVID. So that was, I think, mid-March through as of, these numbers are as of yesterday, 721 pets, which was really phenomenal. I would also add, not only were 136 fosters adopted, but we also, as of yesterday, have 201 animals in foster. And since COVID, we've placed 598 animals in foster. And that's in 670 homes. So some of them, the foster was, you know, not for the entire period of time that we're talking about, but they may have come back and then gone back into another foster home.
Any idea how many came in during this equivalent time?
What the intake was? Well, if we go back to the first slide.
Okay, it's the equivalent data period on there. It was March to July, June. Okay, then that's fine.
Yeah, in May, we had 955 come in. In April, we had 694 come in.
Right. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Next slide.
Worried about any of these animals coming back when people start going back to work and this COVID bubble that we're in is over?
You know, I think it's definitely a concern that we should think about, but and we will, the placement team will absolutely talk about it. But you know, I was fostering and I went on a lot of webinars, and one of them said, you know, I had a dog, they sleep all day. If you go back to work, I mean, I noticed that she slept all day. Especially when I was on a Zoom call, not interested. So as long as you're, you know, maybe a foster is going to say, hey, I can handle this. And I think that's a real opportunity there. So it's definitely something to think about. But the conversation is, what can we do to keep these pets in foster? And then the effort that we will make to get them adopted, maybe not through the foster home, but to a potential adopter.
I'll just say, almost on cue, my failed foster Maribel came and joined me here. And to the 136 recent fosters who've now adopted, I understand and enjoying congratulations.
And I think the number of 136 who went from foster to adopt really saw it like this. I love having this pet, and I don't want to give him or her up. So I think that the foster experience and being in lockdown for so long is going to help with that adoption number. So if we look at placement from the New Hope side, again, huge shout out to our placement partners. They really, it's been such a pleasure knowing that these resources are still out there. We know in the future with additional economic hardship and struggle, we can't always rely on New Hope to be there, but they really did show up in a tremendous way during the crisis. And you can see on the right some of the organizations that we have been working with. And the other thing is, due to COVID, you know, people weren't coming out, and we really stepped up the effort to transport, and Best Friends took over the Wheels of Hope program, and through Best Friends, we transported 194 animals to our partners, and ACC also took on transport. As you can see, we did over 440 transports. So it's really everybody's working together to find the best outcome for as many animals as possible. So next slide, please. This is just, it's missing the header, but this is really just another piece of the community work and how we were out there in the field. You know, we talk about placement. There are animals that come in that have owners, and either they were stray or they were in our care temporarily. Our field team on the far right, that's a member of our field team. There were 274 animals that were reunited with their families, and as you can see in this photo, that was our field team bringing this pet back to this family. And I would just mention that at that time, masks weren't 6 feet apart. It wasn't really that mandatory. When I first saw that picture, I thought, oh my gosh, we're not respecting the rules. But again, my point being, from the beginning, we just kept changing what we were doing based on all of the health guidelines that we received. And then the next slide is just a continuation of the type of work that we were doing, serving the community. If you can turn to the next slide, please. On the far right, you can see a couple of field reunifications, and on the left, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Brennan, because yesterday in the New York Times, I hope that all of you had seen it, there was an article about pets that are left behind in homes due to COVID. And this is just an example of not only the overwhelming challenge that ACC faces, but people have pets. And it is really a very moving and emotional experience. And I think it just demonstrates that we really serving the community, getting into people's homes. That is something we really need to think about as we strategize for the future, especially as COVID sticks around for a while, which is unfortunate, but I think that is a reality. So let me just turn over to Dr. Brennan, because she was interviewed for this piece, and it really is a moving story. And I think it tells a lot about the type of care and compassion that ACC has.
Thanks, Teresa. It's kind of hard to talk about it. So early on, first of all, shout out to a couple of, well, all of the departments at ACC, but I think what people don't understand is that when these people are calling and our admissions team and client care is answering the phone, these people have just lost family members. And a lot of them were out of town or out of state, afraid to come to the city to collect their animals and or their estate. And our team really had to act as grief counselors and social workers. And it was really very, very emotional, and is very emotional still, for them to be on calls for 15, 20, 30, 40 minutes, trying to calm down somebody that just lost a family member, and then also has pets left in the home. And our field team, as you can see, had to suit up in these hazmat suits to go into these homes. Because again, at the time, we didn't know a lot about the opportunity that virus may have to infect the companion animals. And the field team rescued tanks of fish along with cats and dogs, and did so at great personal risk. And so in the beginning, when we were trying to figure out what to do with these animals, there was a concept that was floating around that was really about trying to keep the cats in the homes. And the hope was that if we could keep the cats out of the shelter, as I spoke before, we're concerned about the cats and COVID. We know cats can get COVID. We know cats can spread COVID to each other. And we wanted to keep them out of the shelter, but more importantly, we wanted them to be home for when that person came back. And as we found out, a lot of times people would go into the hospital and end up on a ventilator, and they can't speak and they couldn't communicate whether or not there were pets at home. So we were getting and fielding calls from family members about this. And early on in March, tried to do a proof of concept. I wanted to see whether or not it was okay to go into these homes and feed these cats while we waited for their animals or their owners to recover from COVID. I'm also a trained disaster responder, and I felt personal responsibility with the proper use of PPE. So I did volunteer to go in and feed cats from a home of a woman who eventually succumbed to COVID after several long weeks in the hospital. And from there, we just recognized the importance of keeping those cats stress-free. There's nothing worse than going into a home and trying to net a cat, and also being in that home and not knowing whether or not we were going to get COVID. We didn't want to be crawling under beds, chasing these cats around. So this was, again, a proof of concept that worked very, very well. Unfortunately, it didn't have a great outcome for the pet owner, but as people saw us coming into the building at the co-op, they felt more comfortable going in, and eventually the residents moved on to take care of those cats and subsequently adopt them.
Thanks, Robin. Okay, next slide, please.
It was a very moving story again, and so it was an important story, important New York City story, and I'm very proud of our organization.
Okay, I'm going to Ellen Curtis to what we see in the community.
Just reminding everyone on the participant panel to mute yourselves if you aren't speaking.
Hey everyone, so in the interest of time, I'm really going to focus this slide on what ACC's participation was. The hotline was created out of the Animal Planning Task Force, which ACC has always been a participant of. The hotline was launched on April 20th. So please keep in mind that for the first month that this was really going on, every call that was related to the pandemic was coming directly to us. And it was acknowledged that that was not realistic, given everything that's been talked about so far about the estimations that we had to plan for. And so even though we didn't necessarily get as many animals from COVID homes as we anticipated, there was definitely a planning piece of it that had to take place. So what I really want to emphasize is that while the ASPCA is running the hotline, we are still supporting certain functions of it entirely. And one of that is that any animal that does need to be picked up is picked up by our field team. And then any call, and there has been, as you can see, well over 5,000 calls, but the majority from the ASPCA's reporting, the vast majority of this is basic information. And then it goes into more mitigation. And the cases that are the most challenging are coming to us because we basically, our admissions and client care teams are the ones running the resource hotline. Jenny Coffey from Animal Haven helps with boarding cases, but there have been 219 cases referred to us through the hotline, and these are the most challenging cases. These are the cases where there could be an owner who has been hospitalized, deceased. There could be animals left in a home and there's no way to get in. There have been so many situations where we have been making phone calls trying to get anyone to help us find out. We have had field literally go to hospitals to get keys from owners. We have talked to relatives who are states away to try to set up some kind of way that we can get into a building. And we've literally gone to the point where people have gone, our field team has gone to the building themselves and just hung out and asked anyone, do you know anything about birds that are in this building? I mean, that's one case that we had. So the extremes that we've gone to help people have been extremely impressive. And again, I just want to reemphasize those 219 cases, while they may not seem like a lot compared to how many calls have come in, they are the most time like sensitive and time taking cases that there are. Next slide, please. And so, again, talking about our admissions team, what we really tried to do in this, realizing that we could not have as many animals in the building with what we needed to do with this pandemic and staffing. So reflecting back on what was talked about and going into the teams, that's half our staff that's in the building caring for animals at any one time. So once we had gone through all the placement efforts, then the efforts had to be shifted to doing everything we could to keep animals in the homes. And so we really went back to the core of what we do, but then we really stepped it up, and we've learned so many things, and so many things that we will take forward with us on this. I mean, again, we were always taking animals in, and I want to emphasize again, because I know this has come up so many times, when we say an emergency only, someone who's at our door and telling us they're not going to leave with the animal as an emergency. So that was always an intake we were doing. But what we did was really looked at all the resources that we had, pet care resources.
Seem to have lost people, but I don't know if.
Sorry, should I?
When I lost you for a minute, I'm not sure if everyone else did. But I think you're back.
Fine, Patrick. That might have just been you.
So just like really looking at what medical assistance we could provide, and then offering, you know, what we found is that when we ask people to work with us and we explain the situation that we do want to help you, but can you help us help you and your pet by making an appointment, by going ahead and giving us as much information about your pet in advance as possible, and photos and behavior information, so that we can start socializing that information internally to try to help people, and, you know, externally to find placement. We found that in that situation, people really were willing to help us. And we found that by offering more resources, and when they realized the resources that we had to offer, a lot of them were able to rehome their pets on their own or find solutions to keep their pets. So I think that's why we saw such an increase at this time in the number of preventions we were able to do. You know, we also really relied on people to keep their pet as long as they could. And, you know, when you're asking someone who calls you in March to extend, and now it's getting into June, we are seeing an increase in those appointments because there was such a backlog. So we did anticipate that, but we do continue trying to work with people as much as we can. And there's been a great collaboration between our admissions and client care, along with our placement and behavior, on really becoming more of a resource to pet owners than we ever have before. Next slide, please. So one of our programs that really had to pause completely is our Community Pets program. So we had to completely stop doing our vaccine clinics and our free dog behavior training classes, and our pantry had to close. And so we had to really reimagine completely how to run this program. And the ways that this group figured it out are just amazing to me. we started reaching out to all the human pantries that were near our pet pantry in the Bronx and working with them. We were getting food both from the ASPCA and their food distribution center. We were literally driving. Our community pets coordinator is some days in every single borough. We are doing curbside drop-offs to clients who have immune situations. We are delivering food through Chewy and Amazon to clients. We have now, I think we're working with more than 10 groups in the Bronx and Queens where we're delivering food to them on a regular basis. We were able to secure a $20,000 grant just for food from PetSmart Charities, and we've been putting that to good use. And we've recently started having pop-up, and the photo in the lower left corner is one of our pop-up food pantries where we send out the information of where we're going to be and how many and the times we'll be there. And the first one we had 94 people. The second one we had 118, and we have another one planned for tomorrow. And I mean, just I could go on and on because they've literally sent texts to every single food pantry client to let them know exactly where food's available. And we've had some really, really fantastic feedback from people and created, relationships with them to help them in other ways through this also. I think that's my last slide.
Thanks, Ellen.
Thanks.
I attended one of the pantries, so I can tell you that they were excellent and people were very appreciative.
Next slide.
Yes, please.
Lisa, you're muted.
Okay. Just a quick update on Queens. Christine Kim will give the city's update on the other projects, but we were really fortunate that construction never stopped when we went into all the phases of reopening. We were, from the beginning of the pandemic, still working. Part of it is because the site is an environmental remediation site, and so it was not it was ill-advised to just leave it open and walk away from it. So we did environmental remediation. They're doing soil excavation. Test results show the groundwater remediation was successful. And in June and July, we're just continuing to do foundation work and install some piping, but everything is moving on target and there have been no setbacks at this point. And we are still very optimistic about an opening for summer 2022. Next slide. And with respect to fundraising and development, before I even summarize last year and next year, I just want to say that during the period of COVID, it was really remarkable how much support we did receive. And so just from mid-March to today, we've raised over $600,000 from online donations, direct mail, and grants and corporate. A lot of funders, national funders in particular, they were really out there really asking people to apply for money. We were grateful to Petco Foundation that did a matching donation drive. So if we raised, I forgot already. If Jen DiClementi's on, I think if we raised 25, then they would match us 25, and we did beyond 25.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
In a short period of time, which was exciting. And I think one other thing just to highlight quickly is that what Ellen just spoke about with the pet food and community pets doing that for people in the pet food pantry, most of that, well, all of that money was really coming in from PetSmart, which enabled us to do that. So that was exciting to have that funding.
Next slide.
Congratulations on being able to pivot in this very difficult time, and development has to keep on going and moving to find funders and grantors during this time was critical for us. So thank you.
Yeah, and in particular, Jen and her team did a great job because from fiscal 19 to fiscal 20, we did nearly 850,000 better. That includes what we currently have out 215,000 that are pledged that we're waiting to receive. But even if that doesn't come in before the end of the fiscal year, we will still have done over $600,000 better. The highlights for fiscal 20 really were, we did very well in online giving and institutional giving, and that's informing the strategy for fiscal 21. And of course, significant support due to COVID. That really helped us close the gap on the challenges with Spring Fling being canceled, direct mail. I know a lot of people weren't even touching their mail or opening anything that wasn't essential. So we saw a decline there. And just general donations that we get from outreach events and in-shelter donations went down because of the situation that we were in. But even with those challenges, we still did better than fiscal 19. We had an aspirational goal for fiscal 20 of 4.25 million, which was really a stretch. I think with all of the different challenges, we were very pleased to have come in at between 3.6 and 3.85 for fiscal 20. Next slide, please. And for fiscal 21, really the goals and the strategies are very much informed by what's going on right now. We definitely have to shift some of our thinking, and the strategy is focusing on new funders that are interested in community work. What we see is how much more we can do inside the community before an animal even comes to the shelter. And so looking at funders that are interested more from the human side of community and developing an ask based on community health and how pets are part. We definitely will capitalize on the growth from the online giving and have very targeted asks through email and social media about either it's specifically about COVID or specific, like you saw with the New York Times article, the type of work that we're doing that really demonstrates who we are and who we are serving. We don't want to give up on events, virtual events, super important. I think it's kind of new territory. And Jen can speak to it. I know that she's been to a couple of virtual events doing some intel. I think it will be tough, but Jen, if you want to add something about virtual events, why we're still going to pursue them.
Sure. I have been on a few, and I think that while the whole platform is completely different than having an in-person dinner and fundraising in that way, we can still present the story of all we do all year long, what we've done for COVID, and also have the ability to potentially reach a wider audience of people who might not have bought a ticket in the past, but now are engaging with us. So I think it presents some challenges and differences, but also opportunities. So I think we'll definitely do a 25th anniversary event in the fall, and then we'll have to see what happens in the new year and 2021 brings with events in person, or if we keep doing different kinds of virtual type events that really will hopefully engage a lot of people.
And then the last part about a little shift with respect to grassroots advocacy. While we've always applied for city council funding and discretionary funding, and actually you apply for that, I think sometime in February. So that was already for fiscal 21, we applied, and probably we were too aggressive knowing that the city is going to face some financial hardship. But what we want to do is use grassroots advocacy through board members and staff and our outreach community to see who we could partner with in the locations and the communities that we're serving, and perhaps find sources of funding there, not necessarily from city council members, but within their districts. And then just learning from how well we did with institutional giving and online giving. That's really where the emphasis to get to the goal of 4 million. That's where the emphasis is. We're moving institutional giving as a goal of 2.5 million and individual giving of 1 million. And then the rest in the strategy plan that Jen circulated is how we'll make up the other $500,000. And then finally, just to conclude, next slide. Really, when we usually at this point in time, we're thinking about, oh, what's our strategy for fiscal 21 and what's going to change? It is such a work in progress at this point. We're being informed by mid-pandemic, post-pandemic, if there is a post-pandemic, and what our new reality is. Again, everything is about human safety. Our employees are the backbone. They are the essential workers, and their health and safety is paramount. And everybody in the organization and outside the organization, everyone knows someone who's been afflicted in a very tragic way with COVID, and we can't not recognize that in how we are going to move forward as an organization. So our concerns really are human health and safety. We have to ensure that we have the right number of staff without having too many staff, reducing the number of animals, because the work in the community is working and it is helping us to keep our population down. Recognizing the population is starting to go up as people are more comfortable coming into us, and really pushing into the community. We're doing so much community work, and we're doing virtual work that is successful, telemedicine, some telebehavior, virtual adoptions, helping fosters virtually. So there's a lot of good work that we want to learn from that we're doing. Also, the Animal Planning Task Force that Ellen had talked about, that collaboration of all these different groups in New York City working together, that has to continue. Like, we don't want this to just be work that's crisis driven. We feel like the hotline is very helpful. I mean, a lot of cases that come into ACC can be managed very quickly, and having the hotline is a resource that can help us at least balance our resources so that we can devote more time to the harder cases. And then I would just say we really have to focus on economic hardship. The city, our donors, the people who need us, that is going to have a tremendous impact on our strategy. And again, owner surrender. Will there be a shift? Is COVID going to produce an increase in owner surrender? That's just data we have to study based on what's coming in. The information that the admissions team is getting right now is super helpful. And I said it earlier, you know, we really need to be mindful not only of what's best for the animals, but what is best for the people, including the staff and the clients that we serve. So as we move through COVID, we'll formulate more of a plan. But right now, the plan is we're anticipating COVID will be with us for a long time. We're concerned about another wave in the pandemic in the future, especially in the fall. That's what the experts are talking about. And we're trying to arm ourselves in a way so that we can deal with it. But what I would say is that the collaboration among the entire animal welfare community, nationally and locally, has been tremendous. And the crisis has brought out the best in collaboration and participation among so many. And so we're just grateful that we have established these relationships before so that we could make it a success moving forward. And, you know, trying to do, instead of shutting down, doing what we can do to best serve New York City. So that ends my report. I'm going to turn it over to Christine Kim, who's going to give a brief update on the other capital projects.
Yeah, thank you, Risa. Very powerful report, and you really hit home all the key points in your summary. And I would just say it's ACC stronger as we go forward. And that's with total confidence that you and your team, everyone at ACC and the ecosystem in New York City working to solve animal homelessness is stronger. And we're going to hear from Christine now about our bright future with a quick update on capital projects. Christine, you're on mute.
Hi, are you able to hear me now? Okay, great, thank you. I just want to follow up with Risa's presentation by saying, yes, I 100% agree that heroes work at ACC. And I just want to publicly say thank you from the mayor's office and from the city of New York for all the work that you've done. Not only are your staff going into people's homes and suiting up and like showing true grit and compassion and courage by retrieving animals and being out in the community, but like everyone who works at ACC has shown so much extraordinary commitment. Your admission staff who staff the hotline, they're doing such amazing work, and those 219 cases that came to ACC through the hotline, each of those cases feels like an emergency, and they take an emotional toll. And I am sort of removed from the everyday work, and I hear stories here and there, but the stories that I do hear, like, I carry those around with me, so I can't imagine the toll that it is taking on your staff. And I just want to say thank you, and I want to acknowledge how hard your staff is working. So thank you. Okay, so quick update on the capital projects. This will be very brief because all Department of Design and Construction projects were put on hold at the end of March due to COVID-19. So that affected the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Manhattan projects. Excuse me, I think I scrolled too far. Nope. So all of those projects are on hold. The Staten Island construction had already started by the time New York State was on pause. So this project was reviewed and designated as essential, in construction and demolition continued. The old building has been demolished, and the main adoption entrance and parking lot are projected to be completed by fall 2020. Oops, excuse me. And that's it.
Christine, I hear construction noise in my neighborhood all the time. Are we about to be back on track with those other capital projects?
So the pause on construction was lifted a week or two ago, but DDC has a phased approach for bringing their projects back online. So there are 3 phases, and all of the projects that are currently in design are the last of the 3 phases to be brought back online. So once I have a better sense of those dates, I will certainly update you.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. We're running a little bit behind schedule. We started a little bit late, but we have some people who have signed up to speak, and I'm going to turn it over to Katie Hansen. And also thank you, Katie, for running a very seamless meeting for us as our host. And you're the one who's been keeping track of the people who've signed up. So if you could call on them. And I'm reminding everybody, we've asked you to limit your time to 2 minutes or less. And it's really important that you maintain civility during your comments. And I don't think I need to remind anyone that, but in fact, I probably do. And so I am. Thanks.
Thanks, Patrick. And thanks to the DOH team who have really done all the technology behind this meeting today. We really appreciate their help. There's a few questions that I think may have already been answered in the presentation, but I'm just going to call on, first I'm going to call on Esther. I'm going to unmute you, Esther, and see if all of your questions have been answered.
Well, actually not completely. During the last 4 months, there have been, well, first let me say, I want to thank every AC&C employee who put his or her life on the line. The shelter, coming to the shelter, going to the pop-up food pantries, whatever. I thank you. I know it was a scary period, and it still is a scary period. You talked about spay-neuters. Somebody did spay-neuters during the last 4 months for the AC&C. Whom should we thank? The second thing is for Christine and for Risa, which is, what's the likelihood that after Mayor de Blasio leaves office, that the city will actually come through with the money for all the other capital projects that have been promised? Because we know the city's finances have been devastated. And I'm impressed by the paradigm of having all of these fosters step up. But you're going to have to increase your fosters fourfold in order to get those animals out of the shelter so that your employees, who you only have half of them employed at each shift, can work safely. So how are you going to do that? So those are my questions.
Thank you, Esther. Risa, do you want to take this? Or Robin? Dr. Brennan, are you there about spay-neuter?
Yes, if I can reiterate what I think I heard Esther say is that there were people that were doing spay neuter for us on our behalf. Is that correct? Can you tell me who they were so I can thank them? Because I don't know. I didn't contract with anybody during this time period. The ASPCA also suspended their spay neuter, and they're actually one of our largest vendors. I think in late June this month, Center of Avian and Exotic Medicine came back online to help us with our exotic rabbits and guinea pig population, but we haven't been sending our animals to anyone for the last 3 months.
Capital projects, the future of?
Christine, you want to take that?
Sure. Hi, Esther. Thanks for the question.
You're welcome.
It's a good question, and honestly, it's a dynamic situation, and we're still sort of sorting things out. So I don't have like a solid answer for you right now. I think that we will just have to wait and see as everything evolves.
And the paradigm of having fosters house all of the, most of the AC&C animals. What do you think the future is going to be for that? Lisa?
I'm going to give this one to Ellen.
So I'm not sure exactly what you're asking. Are you asking, like, is our plan to try to have more animals in foster than in care?
Yes, because you can you can only handle so many animals in the shelter to keep your staff safe. So they've got to go somewhere.
Yes, yeah, and we have definitely, I mean, we heard from a lot of people at the beginning, and we have had some kind of contact with everyone, and we plan to continue putting more emphasis on our foster program. And I mean, to be honest, we've seen some results that that have really shown how great it is. I mean, one of the things, cats have really benefited from being in foster and getting adopted directly, because I mean, cats don't do well in the shelter. And so for a potential adopter to be able to see a cat through a Zoom call in someone's home, they're really able to see a behavior that they wouldn't have seen in the shelter. So that's definitely something we've been talking about doing as much of as we possibly can. So, as Risa mentioned, some of our resources and future planning and things are going to change. And I would say foster is definitely one of them.
Thanks.
Okay, next I'm going in, and Adelia, I got your, I see that Adelia and Neil also have a question. So we're going to go with Eva Prokop first, and then we'll go to Greg Smalley, Adelia, and then Neil. So let me unmute Eva.
Hi, Eva.
Okay, Eva, are you there? Eva? I unmuted you, Eva.
I think she's saying in the chat that she doesn't have a microphone, but
she doesn't have a microphone. Okay. When will full service spay neuter? Oh, that's Deborah Thomas. Sorry. I think Eva was asking about spay neuter mostly. Let's see.
Let's move to Greg.
Okay, I got it. How was substantial decrease of stray intake achieved? I actually think, Ellen, that you.
And it's hard to say, but I do think that the biggest thing is that people didn't have the same level of interest in going outside for a while. So while someone have been able or had a situation they considered to be maintainable in their home with their own pet, I just don't think for a while there people were kind of go outside and be outside in the pandemic. So I think that is really, to me, what the biggest thing has been. We were waiting for kittens for quite a while. And I just think with the decrease in people outside, that's what happened. And now we're seeing everything on that front increase as you know, we're moving through the phases in the state and city.
Thanks, Alan. Dr. Brennan, this is for you. How tough with spay neuter of animals placed in foster and adopted out?
One day at a time. We do understand that there is over 500 animals that need surgical services. We started this week with the cat neuters, trying to just figure out what our approach was going to be for safety for our staff, and also because male cat neuter spray is a little bit offensive in somebody's house. Then we're going to move toward the cat space, and we're going to do it. Hopefully it will be a multi-pronged approach. I have approached several private veterinary institutions, and next week I will be addressing the New York City Veterinary Medical Association, trying to engage community veterinarians to participate in assisting us with getting these spays and neuters done. I mean, clearly, in order for us to keep up with what is coming into the shelter now, and also weaving in those 500 spays and neuters, it is going to take some time. So we're going to look at it on a priority basis. So cats and heat right now are a problem. And hopefully we will have some community support with local veterinarians, and then the ASPCA coming back up online. I anticipate it's going to take several months to get this done.
Thanks, Dr. Brennan. And Eva's last question was, what conditions must be met to reopen the shelters to the public? I think that we've already talked about the fact that we've never been closed to the public. We are just stressing that it's appointment only. Due to the layout of the shelter, we need to make sure that people can secure the 6 foot. And that's why we're doing appointment only. Does anyone have anything to add to that? Okay, so we're going to go to Greg Smalley. Greg, I'm going to unmute you. Are you there? Greg Smalley? Okay. Not sure what's going on there. Let's go to, sorry. Let's go to Neil. It's not in alphabetical order, so. Okay. Neil, are you there?
I am. How are you?
Good. How are you, Neil? Thank you.
Neil,
did you end up adopting Lottie?
I did actually. That was going to be my first actual point, is that the dog I appeared with you on Fox for New Year's 2000, I guess it was 19, maybe it was 19. After spending, I think it was 60 days in isolation with the dog and my 2 cats, all of us, I came to the conclusion that it seemed to be meant that this dog is to be by my side, and I guess I'm by his side. And yes, I did adopt Lottie, although his new name is Lotto. But yes, he's sitting under my feet as we speak. He's doing very well. But yes, thank you so much for asking.
Congratulations.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you. So I wanted to first commend the ACC for what you're saying are going to be your efforts to understand bias, implicit bias. I hope the board and the staff take away a lot from those type of courses and articles. We where I work go through a lot of that. We go through many different things. I find it extremely helpful in understanding, again, implicit bias. So I think those things are great. I hope everyone takes away a lot from those efforts that you make there. I also just wanted to quickly also mention I've voiced in the past my concern for the website, which I felt didn't make clear that you did not need an appointment. This is pre-pandemic. I don't recall if I ever noted to you guys that I saw the website was updated. It's much more clear, saying that you don't need to make an appointment, although it's requested. So I like to give credit where credit is due. I think that at least makes it clear to people. The third thing, the last thing is really from the last board meeting when I was there, I submitted an article from the New Jersey Observer, which really talked about ACC's euthanasia of a large number of animals, and they went through the records and concluded that you know there's a higher percent than that ACC was counseling people as when they surrendered their pets or encouraged or whatever term perhaps you want to use. I was wondering if the board had a chance to review that and if there's going to be either an opportunity to have a conversation about that article and the results that they found, because I don't think it was addressed, well, it wasn't addressed at the last meeting and I don't think it was addressed today. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. I'll take a quick stab at that before I pass it off to Patrick. That was a blog article. It's a blog, so it wasn't actually a news article, but what that article did was that incorporated our owner requested euthanasia to the and release. It's not how history calculates. Data is available on the website if you want to review that. And Patrick, do you have anything to add to that about the blog?
I don't have anything to add about the blog, but I'm very confident that the board, working with the senior team at ACC, reviews all our data regularly, monthly, and we ask questions and we're engaged in it. And I'm also very impressed that we're able to be reporting such high live release rates continuously. And so that's my comment. But thank you, Neil, and thank you for those words of encouragement. Thank you for the words of encouragement around diversity inclusion. And I assure you that everyone on the board is equally interested as I expressed and the interest that you've shown.
Thanks, Patrick. Okay, next is Kuhn has some questions. Let me unmute you, Aaron. Sorry. Okay, Karen, are you there?
Yeah, yes, I am. Thank you.
Oh, good. Okay.
I had put some questions up there, but let me just get to one thing is I didn't see any stats on the number of animals killed during this time period. And it also seems like, you know, we get a lot of reports of animals being killed before the 3-day ID hold. So I guess, you know, can you address the how many animals were killed, not owner use requested, but actual other animals that came in that were killed during this time period?
Sure. First, for the question about animals that are euthanized before their stool is up, I'm going to pass that on to Dr. Brennan because those are medical issues. Dr. B, you want to get that one?
I can. I don't know what the data is, and I can definitely look into that. But the only animals that are euthanized during their stray hold are those that are incredibly suffering and dying before our eyes. We do not euthanize animals during the stray hold for any other reason other than complex and dire medical circumstances. And those decisions are made by a team of veterinarians only.
Thanks, Robin. And Risa, I think we do have status on animals that were euthanized so far this year.
We do. For the last 5 months, the total is for medical and behavior issues, no cats for behavior, without the owner requested euthanasia. So hold on, 250, about 360 in total. The cats were all for medical reasons and the dogs were behavior and medical.
Okay. Karen, did you have another question?
Yeah, I do have one other question. We're seeing animals that are coming in that are elderly, and with potential health issues, and it seems like they're still getting a lot of drugs, just without drugs and vaccinations that normally you wouldn't give to an animal that potentially could be sick. So we see animals come in and they immediately given various sedative type drugs, and then shortly thereafter they're deemed hopelessly sick, and the concern is that the animals are getting medications that they shouldn't be getting. They're older animals or behavior wise, and my vet wouldn't give an animal like that immediately a sedative or other medications without first getting them healthy.
Okay, Robin.
Karen, if you can give me specific case examples of animals, I'd be happy to discuss it. I don't really want to talk in generalities. Our protocols that we follow on intake are national protocols that have been sanctioned by experts in shelter medicine with regards to vaccination and the administration of deworming medication, microchip implantation, heartworm, and feline leukemia tests. That's all pretty standard stuff that's written and followed by many, many shelters. Our individual protocols based on, I think you're also talking about trazodone, and I think that we have already demonstrated through a published study the positive effects that trazodone has on the disease rate in our shelter. And I think to answer one of your questions previously that kind of dovetails nicely here is that you had asked right from the outset why outside vet services costs and expenses are going down for fiscal 21. And one of the reasons is because since we've started the trazodone, we have no pneumonia in our dogs. And that was actually one of the primary expense drivers in previous years of why we had to send animals out to specialty hospitals. We had very, very high cases of pneumonia in 2017, 2018. I'm not saying that decreasing fear, anxiety, and stress with the use of a one-time or two-time within a 24-hour period of entry is the sole cause, but there is a cause and effect relationship between the mental health of our animals and the physical manifestation of disease, and we've seen a dramatic decrease. So I stand behind it, and we're going to continue to do it.
Thanks so much, Robin. The next person is Marilyn Galfin. Marilyn, are you there?
Oh, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi.
Okay, I was in the next chat. I didn't even know I'm going to be on the phone. But anyway, I'm trying to find out, because I've asked this before and requested that the rescue-only dogs be featured on the ACC Facebook page. Right now, as a matter of fact, because animals are starting to come in already, I think there's about 8, maybe, I maybe not have the exact number, of rescue-only dogs already at BACC. And so the concern is we'd like to get these dogs promoted because for rescue to even pull, they're going to need an adopter, or a foster. So can they be promoted more? And also what can be done, because we're seeing a lot of animals come in with alleged bite histories that end up being used against an animal with no proof of that bite. So we'd like to see some changes in that. I don't think that's fair. We've seen in some bios, I don't have any cases in front of me, I could find them for you, where you'll see a dog is surrendered and one member of the family says the dog bit, the other person said no it didn't, and then it gets a bite history, and then we have a problem. We're also seeing some incidents. There was one dog called Little Bit, which was an incident within the shelter. The poor little dog was scared. The person cleaning the cage did not put the dog on the other side and put that guillotine down. The dog, of course, was scared, and as the person was pulling out, the dog nipped the person's head. The next thing we know is that the dog got a bite history, and that little dog was euthanized. So these are some of the concerns, if you can respond to any of them and what can be done in promoting more of the at-risk animals, and also opening it up, we've discussed this before, to other approved 501c3s that maybe are not New Hope rescues. So there's a lot right there you can address.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Marilyn. I will let Robin answer the first part, and then I'll ask Ellen to address the New Hope, because I know that we've talked to you about this on several occasions, so this would be a good chance to answer that.
Also, just reminding everyone, it is 11:30. We were set to end at 11, but I'm eager to hear the answers to the questions. But I know we've heard these questions and we also address these matters in our reports as a matter of course.
Robin, you want to?
Yeah, so coincidentally, Marilyn, I am now in the process of having to review and redraft a policy that we have on behavior assessment and determination of suitability for placement of animals. So I've just actually started to do that. We're kind of looking at a different way to approach how an animal gets designated as to what home would be suitable for that animal. And one of the key pieces is gathering data from multiple sources, and then using a group of individuals to discuss that animal and determine what home is best for that animal, or if it's a safe placement in the community. And I do recognize that obtaining information from an owner history, especially where a bite is concerned, has been historically problematic. And I have been doing a little bit of research on how to improve upon data collection, and hopefully with the pandemic sort of settling down and our ability to redirect some of the resources that we currently have toward outward facing programs may give us an opportunity to do a little bit more detective work from our behavior team specifically, and trying to ascertain correct information about that animal's bite history. And then including with that would be also sort of a 360 review of what we're seeing the animal in the shelter, how that behavior is, how that animal is acting in the shelter, and taking all of that information, not just a single point in time, to develop an adopter profile. It's a work in progress. It literally.
Okay, thanks so much, Dr. Brennan. Ellen, I'll have you to address the New Hope question.
So, Marilyn, I'm not sure if you have seen, but we did start putting New Hope only dogs on our website, and Risa touched on that earlier. And we have had, I think, 10 dogs have ended up being placed through this new format, with 2 pending right now. We had about 125 people apply through that. So basically what they're doing is filling out a short questionnaire, expressing interest. We're screening And then if it looks like a good match, we are passing that information on to see if a partner will contact them. And a not good match is basically, we've gotten a lot, unfortunately, from people who are teenagers, like 16, 15, can't legally pursue it, or people who have other animals or children in the home, not appropriate. But we are going to maintain that going forward. And I'm not a big social media person, so I'm not sure about having them also on Facebook, but we can definitely talk about that if that's a more shareable format for people. And then we've definitely opened up, and we've been working with groups through the New York State Federation for Animals and Libby Post in placing animals without them officially being New Hope partners. Also, any group that has a brick and mortar, we pretty much, approve immediately, but we've been streamlining that process. So if there's anyone that you're aware of who feels there's a barrier to them working with us, please reach out to me and let me know, and we will get in touch with them immediately.
The other thing that we're doing is we're also providing more external facing services to keep some of these animals in their foster home or in their adopted home. So we have placed some dogs that might have been out of our comfort zone normally into foster care and provided them with support from our behavior team. We actually even called in a board certified veterinary behaviorist to work on a specific animal that was having problems adjusting in the home that otherwise may have been a New Hope only dog. So we're working to look for ways that we can support without necessarily relying solely on New Hope to do it, but we have to build the internal capability to be able to do that and do it safely. Katie, you're muted.
Thank you, Dr. Brennan. And Marilyn, I'll add the priority dogs back into rotation. Thank you for that. And I just want to also point out that just because a rescue is a 501c3 does not mean that they're a reputable rescue. That's simply a tax IRS designation. And it's important to know that the rescue, in fact, reputable rescue. So that is why we ask people to apply to become a New Hope partner. And as Ellen said, a lot of rescues do. So I hope that's going to answer that question. I think we have one more question from Adelia Harrison. So sorry, Adelia. Hold on, let me just unmute you to find you. Okay, Adelia?
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, great, thank you. Hi, I'm Adelia Harrison. I'm with Brooklyn Bridge Animal Welfare Coalition, and we run the Brooklyn Cat Cafe. Thank you to ACC for all they've done to help pet owners during this crisis. You have said a lot during the meeting that, yes, you are open, but certain intakes are being declined, especially like stray cats and kittens. During normal times, ACC was required by law to take everything. And of course, these are different times now, but groups like ours and other rescue groups are trying to pick up the slack on that. And while we did have a huge uptick in adoptions through the end of May, that is starting to subside. Our intake has tripled. And because of the lack of spay-neuter services and vaccine services from the ASPCA, costs for rescue groups have quadrupled. Each animal is so much more expensive. So I wanted to reiterate the question if ACC foresees any kind of increase in the amount of strays they can take in, or additional support for New Hope partners. That's one question. With your spay-neuter pilot program, are pregnant cats a priority, as well as cats in heat? And we also have a veterinary space that you might be able to use for 2 or 3 days, and our group was in contact with Jessica about that. We haven't heard back, so I want to put that out there. And then finally, we've gotten a lot of requests for pet food that we've tried to help with, and how do we connect people to the community pet food pantries? Thank you.
Thanks, Adelia. I'm going to pass this over to Ellen.
Okay, there are a lot of questions. I'm not really, Robin would be the one to answer the ones directly about spay neuter. As far as stray cats go, I know that we get a lot of people to bring in kittens that really, if they tell us that the mother is not present, we will take the kittens. But if they're underage kittens, the preference is for them to stay with the mother, especially when they're neonates. I'd really need like some specifics, so maybe we can connect. I know that I thought Jessica had been in touch with, I don't remember exactly who had sent the information. I know two groups had contacted us and let us know that there was some surgical space, and we had long conversations about that and what it would take for us to have a team there to do that. And that unfortunately was not, it's not, I mean, Robert could speak more, but it's not so much the issue of another space, it's the staff both to do the intake of the animal for the appointment and the staff to actually perform the procedure. So at this time, we are ramping up our own efforts at our own facilities, but have definitely will keep that as an option if we need that going forward.
Yeah, I run a spay neuter organization internationally. I'm very familiar with large scale MASH type clinics. And I just started to broach the conversation with my team. I don't think that ACC can staff that type of thing, but whether or not an external third party or volunteers could, it's just another thing. It usually takes me about 4 to 6 months to plan a large scale spay neuter effort. And I'm talking like 6 surgeons. So this is a little bit different, but right now to pull our staff from our building and move it over to that building doesn't make logistical sense currently. With respect to, I'll just one thing on community bringing in cats to the shelter. Cats spread COVID. We have to be very, very mindful about how many cats are residing in our shelter, and the possibility of an outbreak of COVID amongst shelter cats. So doing everything that's a real possibility. We know that they can spread it to each other with very little assistance. So not wanting to go through that again, I think that we do have to be mindful about our cat population and doing things that are outwardly facing to try to have cats remain in their homes or be successful and thrive in the community.
Katie, you're muted.
Okay, I think we're done. Unless anyone has any of the board members.
Thank you. Thank you. It's 11:42. I hope we never have to meet this way again, but I found this question and answer session very engaging, and it's been great that we've been able to hear very thoughtful answers from the professionals who are working here at ACC. I think the members of the public, thank you so much for joining us. We had nearly 60 people here who care about what we're doing and want us to do better. We all are striving to do the same thing. And so it's really great to hear your questions. And it's really important for us to hear how we're addressing these issues, and just also how complicated everything is and how challenging it is, even when we are dealing with epidemics and pandemics. And so I think this forum was actually a great way to address those issues. So it really, I think, put a spotlight on all the great work, just like we've heard through this meeting, that ACC is doing. And I'm really encouraged by the way we've been not just weathering this pandemic, but serving the city, serving the animals, and it's work that won't stop. And there's more challenges to come for sure, and we need everyone's support. And I feel confident that we have that. So I'm thanking everyone for joining us today. We do have matters that we need to take up in a private executive session. And so I would like a motion from the board that we move to a private session to discuss those matters that are covered under the public meeting laws that we need to cover privately. Motion, please.
Motion.
Second.
Second.
Okay, so we will adjourn our public meeting. And again, I thank
you very much.
Everyone, in particular, all the people on the front lines at ACC who are doing such incredible work right now. And thank you all for coming. And we look forward to continuing these conversations as we move forward, hopefully in person next time. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.